So last week, the Conservative members of Parliament put forward a motion calling on the Parliament of Canada to call what's taking place in China against the Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims a genocide. Now, this is rightfully what it should be called. I mean, we're talking massive human rights atrocities. We were calling on the Prime Minister to officially adopt this position. We were calling on him to end the silence. We were calling on him to defend human rights, to be a champion of people. We were calling on him to say that this is in fact a genocide. And when I say this, these are the things I'm talking about. I'm talking about mass surveillance of a people. I'm talking about using violence against these individuals. I'm talking about gang rape of the women. I'm talking about forced sterilization of these individuals. I'm talking about forcing these people into concentration camps by the millions. This is for the purpose of eradicating a people group from China. For all intents and purposes, it is in fact genocide. And we were calling on the Prime Minister to declare it as that. To do so would be to take leadership. To shy away would be to protect silence, and therefore to actually find himself on the side of the aggressor rather than standing with the victim. Because we know that at the end of the day, silence on an issue like this does nothing for the victim and everything to perpetuate the behavior of the aggressor. So we were giving the Prime Minister an opportunity to stand up and to be counted and to take his voice and use it on the world stage and to show leadership on behalf of people who are innocent. Holocaust survivor Ali Wiesel, he said this. He said, "We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented." We cannot say the phrase "never again" as we did when the Holocaust took place, and yet fail to take action when something like this is taking place halfway around the world. We have an opportunity as leaders here on Parliament Hill to stand up and to have our voices heard and to speak out on behalf of the innocent, those who are being targeted by the Communist Party in China. Today, that went to a vote, and just a couple of days before, actually, there was a senior Liberal member of Parliament who spoke out and urged the cabinet ministers to, quote, wake up and smell the roses when it came to China. Now, Canada might be a small country in terms of our population, but when it comes to our commitment to human rights, we're actually a towering giant. We lead the way in our respect for people, for human life. And so this was our opportunity. It was an opportunity to show leadership on the world stage and to stand up for our fellow man, to make sure that they're not persecuted based on race. Today the vote went forward. And when we voted just a couple of hours ago, all of the Liberal backbenchers, they did the honorable thing. They spoke up, they had their voices heard, and they voted yes with those on the side of the opposition. But the ministers, those who are around the cabinet table, those who are closest to the Prime Minister, where were they? Well, they were prohibited by the Prime Minister of Canada from showing up and having their voices counted. It's shameful. And the Prime Minister, you might wonder, well, where was the Prime Minister? Well, the Prime Minister, you might be interested to know, didn't show up at all. So he didn't actually show up and let his abstention be known. He didn't show up and vote no. He didn't show up and vote yes. He just didn't show up, which is an incredibly cowardice act. He lacked the gall to be able to come and stand by the decision that he made. He urged his ministers to refrain from voting, and he made it clear that he was not in favor of this motion, and yet he did not make that publicly known by showing up in the House of Commons or virtually and voting. Now, I find that particularly interesting because the Prime Minister has worked very hard to shut Parliament down over the last number of months. And he's switched everything to be virtual, which means it's very easy to turn on your computer or your iPad or your phone even, and to be able to vote by virtual means. The Prime Minister didn't even do that. That is a lack of leadership. And it's so sad, so shameful, so unhelpful, especially in light of the atrocities that are taking place halfway around the world. It is time for the Prime Minister to stop playing games, to stop appeasing China, and to call on the Communist Party of China, the regime, to stop the human rights violations. It's time for Canadians to use their voices, to speak up, to stand up, to make ourselves known to the Prime Minister and what our desire is in terms of Canada's place on the world stage. Luckily, even though the Prime Minister didn't show up, even though he instructed his cabinet ministers not to use their voices in favor of this motion, it still passed, with the help of other opposition parties who are in the House, along with backbenchers who are part of the Liberal Party. So kudos to those who did the right thing, who stood up, and who honorably stood for human rights around the world.